My wife, 35F, and I, 35 male, have been married for 15 years and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids, 12, 14. We absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for them. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school, band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little sex, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much, we essentially became roommates co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer was in love with me and that she only saw me as a best friend. That she only loved me in a very platonic way, and this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy and let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I felt completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies, and her answer was, "I don't know, and that I have built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from." As you can imagine, this provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, I'm frustrated, and I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no sex drive and no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do, or what is it about me that is so unattractive or undesirable, and her response is always, "I don't know." She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same. That she has been feeling disconnected for years, and that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only the children for now, and that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and her sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point for any of that is to be intoxicated, which I believe is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which to my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., and we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward, even with the hard topics, so I don't smell nor feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to only be intimate or have sex when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance of not partaking in this only when I'm high or drunk sex, because it doesn't sit well with me. I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. We did some swinging in the past. That was fun for some time. We mutually decided to stop doing it, and we have established it's not the case. When we were swinging, however, our marriage seemed to be in a good place. This is something we did disclose with our couple therapist and made sure to include it to make sure we're not neglecting an obvious potential issue. I will say, I did ask my wife if what she experienced during swinging is something that is affecting her view on our relationship, and she said it wasn't. Our swinging experience was always together, and it was very sex-driven. Nothing really emotional or poly. Truth is, I have to believe her at her word. I have no reason to distrust her. To date, she's always been very forward and never afraid of dealing things head on. No matter how painful. Swinging was her idea. Not mine. But I suppose I should have included it, but I honestly believe her on it not being an issue. I don't have any reason to distrust her. Maybe it's something she has to accept with her therapist or our couples therapist. Update 1. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment, and it has been really eating me up inside knowing my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally/mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we are 14 years old. Our long history of growing up and how having children when she was 19 years old, me 20, significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process, and we essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies, 2 kids now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directly mostly at my wife about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very our kids focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying yes it sucked because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside of the lens of being a mother and to try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually, and it was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She also was very clear in saying, I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends. This was huge because one of the big pieces that has caused a strain in our lives is how siloed and isolated we've been, again busy raising kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life. Especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps we have no experience navigating, and even simply for enjoyment. It has always been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs that external stimuli. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session I started to feel like there was a common denominator, the kids, in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing. So I simply asked her, do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young? I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes 2 to tango. I did feel like it was progress because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens, so we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still all very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what her plan is moving forward. Note, I had decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being a co-parenting roommate, that I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me as of now, and that she loves me immensely and she feels bad for not being there for me, as mentioned in my first post. I also brought up the brief swinging that happened, to which for the 50th time said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was something that was a mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much inexistent when we tried this. We, both, really have no issue to this. We know it happened, we tried it and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I will not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or require me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct in saying that I will not be accepting this dynamic and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and is very much interested in maintaining an active intimacy and sexual relationship. I expressed how I am not going to be a convenience and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly and that I do want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage so long as she is as well, and that if she wasn't, it's okay. However, I will not be a part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving, and I do not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continues, that divorce will be the only outcome. Of course, tears were involved and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still nothing was said, and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short and cold and transactional. The saddest part is realizing, this dynamic already is very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife that, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate/co-parent dynamic without reproach, and that it should be no mistake that I am not happy here and I am never going to be okay with it, but I am done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself. Very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day and we only spoke when necessary. Few days I keep this going and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she's stressed and she thinks something is wrong with me because I'm indifferent. I simply listened, then I told her that this is the dynamic she proposed and that I'm simply, much like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie, it has been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way just to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180 and let's just say, there has been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50 and she lost her shit. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, hey, friends go in 50-50 and as your friend I expect nothing less. This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of I'm really taken for granted and how her level of comfort and convenience at my expense is really overlooked. I pushed through anyways and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for and that it's still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. I'll wrap up with this. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I am still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realization that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she pretty much neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very much cordial and amicable even to this day, and it's a very good sign. Boundaries are set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapist until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this non-biased third party really helps as a witness and as a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in a sexless, intimacy-less marriage because we both deserve better. Now on to second story. Ex-brother's rich, snobby girlfriend called us white trash, sparked a chaotic dinner brawl, and now her wealthy friends try to ruin my career. I was the parentified sister and basically raised my brothers. I helped them learn how to cook and clean, helped them with homework, took them to extracurriculars, helped them figure out scholarships/trade schools/colleges, and basically made them into the men they are today. My brothers are very aware of the situation that I was in, having to take on parental duties, and thus do not treat me like one. I am their sister and they treat me as such, which of course means having a few crazy sibling traditions, which is where my situation stems from. I, 30F, just had my birthday pass. Mark decided to help Owen organize a celebration dinner, since everybody had something to celebrate. Owen just got engaged to Trish, Jack just got a huge pay raise, Kyle started an online shop, Rob bought his first house, it's a motor home, and Finn just started his first serious relationship. So, Owen organized a huge dinner at a pretty fancy place, with my brothers and husband each planning to split the tab with Margot, and omit me since it was technically my birthday and thus shouldn't pay. Fast forward to the dinner and we're seated in the back due to having so many people. Everybody is having a great time, laughing and sharing more information about their life, when Margot has an old video pop up on her phone memories. It's a video of a birthday dinner when I was a teen, and it showed my brothers giving me my birthday bruises. You may have heard of birthday punches. Well, it's basically the same concept. However, due to my brothers being massive hulks of meat and me being no more than 5 feet 1 in, they opt to flick me instead, so I'll get a tiny bruise instead of looking like I was jumped, lol. Rob decides to start with the birthday bruises tradition, each of my brothers opting to flick me 6 times, so this way I get an even 30 flicks, with Margot and Mark each giving me 2 for good luck. Did it look strange? Probably, but we already stood out in the restaurant since we had so many people. And, it's not like we made it a big show, I simply went around the table to each of my brothers. Trish and Ro were laughing, well aware of the familial situation and that it was all in good fun. But, I did notice Annie didn't really seem to be comfortable. So, when she went to the bathroom, I decided to check on her. Old habits die hard. I didn't approach her until she was washing her hands and asked her if everything was okay. She simply sneered and said we were embarrassing and low class. I told her that I didn't understand the attitude, that tonight was meant to be happy and we were just being ourselves. To be completely honest, my words were along the lines of this is who we are, we're siblings, we hate each other. It's not that deep. She once again sneered and said, well, this is a place where it's not okay to be yourselves, with a mocking tone. She then stormed out of the bathroom, so I returned to the table. She was sulky the rest of the dinner, and when the bill came, she tried to drag Finn off. This started a little quarrel with my other brothers, who all agreed beforehand to split the bill. Annie stepped in and said I could pay for them since white trash makes do. This started a fight with Margot, who threw wine on her and said you want white trash, you got it. I tried to take control, but Annie was already trying to get on Margot. Ro and Trish took her outside and the rest of us settled the bill and apologized for the disturbance to staff. When we left, we saw Annie swinging at Trish with Ro trying to get in between. I immediately stepped in and told Annie to leave, that until she apologizes that she wasn't allowed at any family gatherings, and told Finn that if she ever tries anything to call us immediately. Finn said that wouldn't be a problem and broke up with her right then and there, telling her to call a cab. He was apparently very upset to be called white trash and didn't like how she talked to me. He also later said she looks like she would accuse me of something, and that she's apparently done it to her ex. The problem I am currently dealing with is Annie's social circle. Annie apparently comes from a pretty affluent part of our community, went to a private school and had a personal chef and nanny kind of rich. Her and a bunch of her wealthy friends have tried to defame me, sending emails to my boss and coworkers. I told them to reply that they would be forwarding the email to me and I will sue for harassment and defamation if she continued to do this to me or any of my family members. The emails haven't bothered most of my coworkers, but I have a select dozen that already didn't like me, and now are using this to make my work life hell. I have already spoken to my boss about it, and they are monitoring those coworkers' work emails to assure Annie isn't sending anything. Margot told me I should go ahead with my threat the next time someone gets an email, and file defamation charges, along with harassment and emotional damages. The thing is, Annie is 23, she's barely out of school, and this will wreck her life. Update 1. 2 days after my post went up, Margot's car got egged. She and 2 of her neighbors caught the perpetrators on camera, and 2 of Annie's flying monkeys, which I am now calling them because someone in the OG post called them that and I laughed so hard at the accuracy, were taken into custody. And boy, were these girls rats. They sold out Annie in a heartbeat. I almost pitied the poor girl until I came out of work and found the words "you deserved your miscarriage" spray painted on my car hood. Information: I suffered a miscarriage at the beginning of the year after one of my students, I work in a behavioral school, kicked me down the stairwell. I had been trying to help another teacher, and there was a security guard also present, but the kid just kicked my shin and nobody caught me in time. I was 6 months along when it happened and suffered it while at work. It was a whole scene with ambulances, admin staff, district staff. Meanwhile I was just bleeding and crying. I was given PTO for 2 weeks and by the time I returned to work, everybody knew. I got plenty of soft looks, everybody made my food or tried to make me feel better, even the ladies who didn't like me. I was just thankful summer vacation was coming up. I took photos of the vandalism and presented it to my boss, since the paint was still wet, which means there should be camera evidence. They told me to sit tight and they would take care of it. After 30 minutes, my boss, one of the coworkers who didn't like me, and 2 security officers came back. Turns out, the coworker who didn't like me had fed Annie that information, and was promptly fired on the spot after being forced to apologize to me. They also had security look through the parking lot footage, and got the license plate of Annie's car screeching out of the parking lot with her tossing a can of spray paint out the window, and denting another car in the process. Police were called and the spray can was taken as evidence. I was advised to get a lawyer and press charges. At this point, I decided to talk to a lawyer, so I looked at lawyers when I got home and consulted one the next day via a virtual consultation. He offered to do the case pro bono, as he had a bone to pick with Annie's mother, not my business to tell, but whoa, was that story crazier than mine. We drafted all evidence into a compiled document and went through with pressing the charges for the damage to my car, as well as harassment and emotional distress. Let me tell y'all, I was expecting there to be a blowout when this happened. But, karma ate her up. Apparently, Annie has more than just what she did to me. The coworker whose car she dented when she threw out the spray can was pressing charges. Margot was also pressing charges for emotional distress. Also, turns out, she had been going after my brothers. She and her flying monkeys were review bombing Kyle's shop. They slashed 3 tires on Rob's mobile home. She had been sending complaints to O.N.'s boss through customer service lines, and she had stolen Jack's fence surrounding his house. WHOTF steals a fence? Apparently the amounting charges finally caught Daddy's attention, because he had everybody who was pressing charges come to one of his properties to talk it out. He had paid her bail and was keeping her in close proximity to assure she didn't get into any more mischief. Margot said she would be bringing her lawyer, and advised everybody else to do the same. So, it was actually pretty funny watching Annie's face as we all pulled up with our lawyers, with the exception of Finn, who was just coming as a character witness and had a file of evidence all his own. She had been harassing him and blackmailing him, and was ready to feed these absolutely damning evidences to the pack of lawyers who were attending. It's worth to note that I had not gotten the spray paint removed, so when Annie's father saw it, you could see the boiling, quiet rage in his glare. Annie's father, who I will dub Hunter, also had his lawyer present. The sit-down lasted 2 days, with all the lawyers going over the different charges and appropriate ways to punish them. My coworker was simply paid out, with some extra financial compensation and a few coupons from Hunter's businesses. Jack was returned his fence and Hunter paid to have it reinstalled, repainted, and for a 10-year warranty. Jack still stayed as emotional support since Mark was away on business. All the false reviews were removed from Kyle's shop and Hunter paid for any lost revenue. That talk was done between Hunter and Kyle in private, so I don't know how much he was paid. Hunter also contacted Owen's boss, who he apparently went to school with, and set the record straight. Hunter also decided to pay for Trish and Owen's honeymoon as excess compensation. That just left Margot, Rob, and I. The lawyers, us 3, and Hunter agreed to culminate the charges into one case, and Hunter was able to wrangle the district attorney to come and try to strike a plea deal. I can't say much about that since the case is still ongoing, but just know Annie will be paying for her crimes. Hunter offered to get me a new car. I had been driving the same car for 10 years, and I told him I'd settled for a used one. Hunter made a fuss, saying I didn't raise my daughter like this is all her mother. Like, wow, this woman must be a demon if even her own husband throws her under the bus like that. So, Hunter is taking me car shopping. Wifey is apparently pissed that Hunter isn't covering for their little princess, and Annie is getting her just desserts. Funny how money is indeed a very powerful thing, as Hunter even got the case to be moved to a priority list and thus proceedings will be sped up. To top everything off, Hunter said all the payouts will be coming from Annie's inheritance. Which is why he was so okay with giving out so much excess compensation. God, Annie's face. I wish I could have photographed it. I have no issues updating once the proceedings are finished. I will make sure to keep a spare tab open just so I don't lose this throwaway. It seems to be a pretty happy end for me. I didn't expect it to be solved in under 10 days, but Hunter is a very nice man. Maybe the Gen Zs shouldn't eat this rich, he's a good one lol. He even invited Mark, Trish, and Ro out for drinks to discuss compensation for the scene at dinner, too. Right now, I'm just relaxing on my sofa while Mark makes popcorn. We're about to binge some cartoons. We like spending our Sundays like that.